Hi, welcome back to another Biblical History on the Go. Today, we are going to actually talk a little more about the Antichrist. Looking into the document that I spoke of in the first video that I wrote, there's a whole lot to do with the Antichrist as far as prophecies go, and we talked more specifically about Donald Trump and whether or not he's the Antichrist for the second video. But I want to take this moment to actually look a little more into some of the more specific prophecies about the Antichrist that can be kind of paralleled as to why the Israelite people and the world would be deceived by the Antichrist when he appears as being the Messiah, being Jesus, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and unravel that deception for you. So not only when it happens, if you don't believe it's going to happen, if it ever happens, you would know. So when you saw it, you'd understand it and know it to be true. So the information regarding the Antichrist, and I apologize for it's a bit dark on the video here, but I can't really do too much about it. There we go. Have a little bit of light here. So the name of the Antichrist is like the biggest mystery, and everyone knows, like, oh, the number is 666. It represents his name. More specifically, the Bible says it represents the number of a man. Whatever that means, nobody's figured that out yet. And it's supposed to be a riddle. It's supposed to be a mystery. Why? Why is this supposed to be a mystery? Why wouldn't God just tell people? Because if God just told people, they would know, and the devil would shift up his methodology to deceiving people. Why is that an issue? We'll have to get into that in another video, maybe in the next video. We'll talk about, actually, that would be a great point. We'll talk about the devil. How is he on earth? Is he the same as God? Does he have the same power as God? Is he equal level, or is he less? Why does he have the power that he does? Why doesn't God just do away with evil and the devil and everything? We'll talk about that in the next video. But this video, there's a riddle in Revelation, I believe it's chapter 17. I want to say verse 10. I looked at it today. I can't remember what it was exactly, and of course, I'm on the go, so I can't really dive back into that right now. But the riddle goes, it's a riddle of 7 kings. So the riddle goes, 5 kings are fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. But when he comes, he must remain for a short time. And the 8th is the Prince of the Covenant, or the Antichrist. Another way that the Bible identifies the Antichrist is as the one who makes the abomination of desolation, which is a reference to something that happens in Daniel, and it doesn't have to do with Babylonian king. What it does have to do with is prophecy, future prophecy, the third temple being built in Israel, and a statue being made of the Antichrist or of the beast, and that statue, or the throne being set up in the temple, and then the Antichrist himself, the actual person, sitting in that throne and claiming to be God. And that's the only definitive point in history that everyone will know from that point on. This is the Antichrist for certain, for 100% certain. Of course, you can know beforehand if you know the riddles and you see these things coming beforehand. You can warn people and say, okay, this is what's going to happen next, because we're 100% sure this is the guy. Watch these things. When it happens, you'll know this is exactly who we said he was. So that's the whole point of the prophecies, is to prepare, to watch and be ready. All right. So that riddle, let's talk about that a bit. In the Bible, Old Testament, and actually this isn't that old, as people still, well, not today, but people in the not too recent past used to refer to their children as children above the ground, children below the ground. This was in a time where the life expectancy of your children was never certain. You didn't know if your children would live, if they'd get some kind of disease, if they would die. So people would reference their children as to whether or not they were alive. This is the same thing that's going on in the Old Testament, the same thing that's going on in that riddle. Someone who is alive. Someone who is not is dead. That's how the Bible references people often throughout the Old Testament. So what we get in this situation is 5 kings are fallen. What does that mean? They're gone. They're done for. And we can assume they are dead. Why? Because there's no kings who were alive when the secession continues on, or at least not that I can remember. There aren't any kings that continue being king or stopped being king when they weren't when they were still alive, except for one situation which we'll get into, because it's actually really important. So 5 kings are fallen, 1 king is. So 1 is alive, and 1 is yet to come, and then the one after is the Antichrist. So interestingly enough, I know you're probably counting. This is the parable of 7 kings. There are 7 kings, but in this parable there are 8, and one of the 7 are the Antichrist. So it's important to note also that the Israelite people don't have a monarchy. They no longer have a kingship. They've got a democracy like America. So the interesting thing here is, for this to happen in end times, as we've talked about in previous videos, the Israelite nation has to go back to a kingship. And we can already see, if you look at the Trump video, is Trump the Antichrist? We can already see that Israel is kind of worshiping Trump. And not to say that he is the Antichrist, but they are behaving in such a way that would promote a monarchy. And of course, that's yet to be seen. But the significant thing to notice here is that this parable is for the Israelite people. This isn't talking about just what king is it? Maybe it was Cyrus because he built the second temple, right? Or maybe it was Caesar, or these are all the things that you'll hear people say, Christian or not. As far as like who's the Antichrist, how are you supposed to know which kings it is? Well, it's talking about the Israelite people. The entire Bible is about the Israelite people, except for when you get to the New Testament, and then it's about everyone who are the children of God, obviously through Jesus, and then of course that's explained in another video. We're not going to get into that. So if this is about the Israelite people, immediately, if you know anything about the biblical history, there were a lot of kings in Israel, and specifically there were a lot of kings on 2 different sides of the nation of Israel. So in the book of Judges, basically there's a point in time where the people abandoned God, and then they were like, hey, we want a king. So God's like, all right, this is going to fail for you horribly. So they made Saul king. Saul screwed up, decided to do his own thing, got power hungry. And then comes David. David has a son, or a few kids. David was a horrible father, but still, he was a man after God's heart. There were complicated times, whatever, Game of Thrones. So you end up with a situation where the nation of Israel is slowly declining in their morality. And by the time Solomon comes around, who was notably the richest king who ever lived, richest person who ever lived, by all kinds of scholars, regardless of you're Christian or not, this one person everyone agrees existed. David is a point of contention for a lot of atheist historians and scholars. Nobody wants to believe that David existed, primarily because of what David represents and what that would mean for the people of Israel, especially in the conflict that's currently going on. So Solomon had 2 different kids. Solomon specifically did great things for God. However, eventually his heart was swayed. Solomon had like 300 concubines. Who knows how many wives? He was the womanizer. He had everyone in the kingdom essentially. And eventually his wives had turned his heart away from God, the God of Israel, the God of his people. And so he started worshiping other gods. He built temples and palaces for the gods of his wives, who were not for God, right? So what happens then is God tells Solomon through the priests, of course, because God wasn't speaking directly to the kings. He spoke to So God tells Solomon he's going to split the nation of Israel and then eventually bring the nation of Israel back through the Davidic line, through his father's line, and preserve the people. So the nation under his second son, Rehoboam, was split because his son decided not to take the counsel of his fathers. Instead, he appointed his own younger council, the cool kids who nobody agreed with, or at least most of the people did not agree with in Judah. So the nation split up. The 12 tribes of Israel became one tribe of Israel against 11 tribes of Israel. They became two different countries, two different nations. So at that point, you get the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles. One represents only the kings in the kingdom of Judah. The other represents all the kings in the kingdom of Israel. It's still called Israel, but Judah is no longer included in that grouping. And that's why there's two different books. That's why the names are different. But if you look at them, even if you read them kind of side by side, you'll see this was the king during this time, and this was the king on the other side during this same time. And you look through it, and basically what happens through Kings and Chronicles is Judah tends to follow God and his ways, while the rest of the nations of Israel constantly do not. There's maybe like one or two people. But at the end of it, even Judah is no longer following God. And that's where the nations are ransacked again by Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. And then the nation of Israel is destroyed, essentially, or broken up until Jesus' time, Cyrus, the Assyrian, who brings the nations back. So, why is this significant? Throughout the Bible, there's a few points you can look up easy. Google, as always. You don't have to be the Pope to go through and read all the scrolls and find out where the information is. It's good to know, and anyone can know it. It's not that difficult to read the Bible. But in this day and age, the information age, you literally could just go on Google and say, this verse, and it'll say, this is where it's located. So you just really need to know the information, and the internet can tell you where to find it. You can read the context. So look up this verse. It is, hold on a second, what was I thinking about? Lost our train of thought. Regarding the kings, yes, the kings. So if you look at the kings in Israel, God, the Father, represents this, or speaks it multiple times through his voice, okay? Like his word, not like, the prophet says maybe we should do this. No, like God says, they have set up many kings, but not by me. Look up those words specifically, type in Bible afterwards, you'll get the verses. So what does that mean? What does that mean? It means God is not approving of the kings that are being appointed by the people. Does that mean Saul? Does that mean David? No. God specifically appointed them. He allowed those kings to exist. Remember when the prophet tells the people of Israel, this is a great affront to God. It's a major sin. In fact, it's Israel's greatest sin. They abandoned their God multiple times. This is their sin, and this is why they find judgment. This is why they find punishment and a lack of mercy for their nation. It's because they will continue to do so until they look upon the one they've pierced, which is an Isaiah prophecy talking about Jesus, who is their God, who came in the flesh. As they wanted a king in the flesh, God came in the flesh. They denied him, crucified him. And so they will be surrounded and on the verge of utter destruction when Jesus will show up. That's end time prophecy for Christians. So check it out. They have set up many kings, but not by me. That points out that basically all the people in the book of Kings, book of Chronicles, these were all people that were man-made. God was out of the question as far as the kings of these nations go, as soon as the nation of Israel was no longer the 12 nations, or the 12 tribes. As soon as they split, because God promised he would split up the nations and then preserve the Davidic line and then one day bring back their king, the kingship. That king that came back and reunited that was Jesus. So what does that mean for our riddle? This means you can go back into the books, into whatever's before Kings and Chronicles, Joshua. Is it Joshua? It's in the book of Kings, actually, where Saul is eventually appointed, because Kings is about Judah, I'm pretty sure. So look into there, find that story, start reading. See how many kings there are before Jesus, before the nation splits up and those kings are no longer counted. Ironically, or not ironically, like historically, this is what happens. You have Saul, the first king. You have David, the next king. You have David's son, Absalom, I'm pretty sure his name was. He usurped the throne, but he did so legally, behind his brother's back. He rallied the nations, and he tried to usurp the people, and he did. He claimed the throne for a very short time. And no, this is not like the person, the Antichrist. So oh no, it's Adonijah. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? It might be a reference to a name, the name of the Antichrist, we may see. But anyway, so he usurps the throne essentially from Solomon, David's son. And then David is still alive at this point. He was going to appoint Solomon as king. The brother stole it, but it was still counted because they did go through all the processes. And even the prophet who anointed the king in that time, or there was a prophet who did so. So David finds out he didn't annul it, but he took away the authority, because I guess that's how you can do it. So Solomon becomes king. Solomon disobeyed God, like we said earlier, and so God said he would take away or split the nations, not in his days, for the sake of the work that he did do, but in his son's days. So Solomon's son, Rehoboam, the fifth king, in his days the nations were split. He was the last king that God appointed, Rehoboam. After that point, goodness, maybe 20 kings in each of the sides. It's just generations of kings, and depravity in the nation of Israel, until eventually Jesus comes along. Jesus is king. So 5 are fallen. We know which 5 those are. And then 1 is. That clearly represents Jesus, because no other king is alive. 1 is yet to come. That means they will be alive. But that means they couldn't have been from the past, right? So 1 is, which is Jesus. 1 is king. And that's important to note as well. Jesus is king. He's alive. He came to establish the kingdom. That's what he did. And then eventually he'll return and fix things. And then there's the Antichrist, who is somewhere in that mix of the 7. Now, here's the interesting thing. The Antichrist, if you look into the book of Revelation, crawls out of the ocean, crawls out of the depths of the ocean. One of the things that you see about the depths is another prophecy about the Garden of Eden, actually, the tree of life, which is said to have, or the nation which is said to have housed the tree, is hidden in the depths of the sea. The nation was destroyed. Some people might think this is Atlantis. Sure, names of nations change based on the culture you're within. So these people were a very advanced civilization that were very much comfortable in the seas of the Mediterranean. And there is a spot in the Mediterranean that goes way, way deeper than any other part in the Mediterranean and has not been excavated. It's not been searched. My bet, that city is down there. Atlantis, you want to call it, right there. There's a Greek historian, Herodotus, who spoke of Atlantis from the Mediterranean, having seen it, which apparently, I don't know how that works, and I don't know how time works. So there's really no proof there, other than the fact that there's this myth of a nation, Atlantis, that existed, which fell into the sea, and then there's this Hebrew story of a great nation that also fell into the sea. I don't know if you can call that coincidence if multiple cultures have the same stories about a single nation that was destroyed in a single day in the sea for whatever reason. So what does that mean for us? That means that the Antichrist could very well be a human person who, for whatever reason, is given life again to come up and deceive the people. Does that mean it's Trump? I don't know. Have you seen that wig on his head? Like, man doesn't look alive. But could be. Maybe, maybe not. Nobody really knows where he's from. And I don't care if you go and look up his birth record or whatever. You know, the internet is a crazy place, and lots of people fake identities. So we're not caring about that. We're looking at the signs. So here's what we got. 5 kings have fallen. We know which kings have fallen. Jesus was the next king, the 6th king. He is the king. After that, you have another king that's to come. That king will only last for a short time. One of the prophecies for the end time is that a raiser of taxes will come, and he only lasts for a short time. In a few days, it says, he'll be destroyed, but not in anger or in malice. I guess he dies of a heart attack or something. Who knows? And then the king after is the Antichrist. So this actually does put the Antichrist in a peculiar situation, because that means the king, the Antichrist, is someone who was alive as one of those 5 and is now dead. And because of the great deception that must happen when Satan gets his power to do so, to deceive the nations, is one of those 5 kings. Not going to be David, and it's not Jesus, and it's probably not Solomon. My bet is on the king who usurped the throne and was ultimately killed for it. So that is pretty ironic, that the king who tried to usurp the throne of Israel to control the nations would get that ability and would do so. He would definitely do so, no doubt about it. So that's kind of what we're looking at for this this Antichrist situation as far as the kingship. So let's talk about Jesus some more. Jesus is called the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the one who is, was and is to come, as is referenced in Revelation. Again, you see that term was. He was alive. Is. He is alive. He is to come. He will come back. The Antichrist in the book of Revelations is referenced as the one who was and is not and yet is. And I'm kind of like, this is being revealed to me as I'm speaking it to you. Was and is not and is and yet is. He was alive, the Antichrist. He is not alive. He is dead. And yet he is alive somehow. He's dead, but there he is walking around. There he is doing these miracles and whatnot, which further solidifies the understanding, I don't say idea, understanding that the Antichrist is one of those 5 kings. It's not David. David was a man after God's heart, and Satan's not a necromancer puppet. So that's not how things are going to go down. My bet is on this guy, and I wish I could look up his name right now. It starts with an A. Just look it up. David's son, the kings. Pretty sure it's Adonijah or it can't be Absalom. I want to say it's Adonijah, but look it up anyways. You'll find it easily. Kings after David. Look that up. So the Antichrist will appear out of nowhere, essentially, and he will have power to deceive the nations. He'll have the power to show miracles, to do signs and wonders in the sky. You know, all the twinkling lights and everything that people expect when they hear Christianity and the Holy Spirit. The things that people expect of the Holy Spirit. And some people, I'm willing to bet, he's probably going to be able to heal people as well. So somebody's going to say, oh, well, how can the devil do good things? How can he make, the blind see? And the reality is, no work is good. There is nothing that is good about mankind, or nothing is good about, or good or evil about a tool, which is power to do something. Evil people do good things, and Jesus even says this, right? If the evil know how to give good gifts to their children, how much more so than our Father in heaven? What he's saying there is actually kind of profound. Bad people do good things. That does not make them good people. Bad people are doing good things. just as good people are doing good things. Those good things do not reflect on the person. The heart of the person reflects on the person. And the heart of the Antichrist is against God and against his people and against humanity and against good. So just because he can, do fancy magic tricks doesn't mean he is good. And that is huge to remember. If you see at any point in time somebody who is identified as king in Israel, who has some kind of mystical power, who is injured to the point where he should be dead and yet survives and appears to be a man of peace who's trying to unite the nations and who manages to succeed in resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict after 70 years, this man is the Antichrist. Guaranteed 100%, not up for discussion. He is the Antichrist. And you will know it because the Israelite people will accept him as their king. But they're not just accepting him as their king. They understand their prophecies. This is why they killed Jesus. If Jesus was their king, then he would have to be the Messiah. They're still waiting for that sixth king, the one who is. They understand that reference. The next king that Israel appoints is the Antichrist. He is the one they will worship as God. And this person will sit in the throne after creating the third temple and claim to be God, and they will accept it. And worse, Christians will accept it because they see the signs and they see the wonders, and they aren't watching and they aren't ready. They never read the Bible. They haven't heard these words. They don't know what to be looking out for. And if they've never heard it, then when they hear it afterwards, they'll say, no, that video was made like a week ago and they just changed the time because technology these days. They will be deceived. That's what Jesus said. If it was possible, even the elect would be deceived. And I'm telling you, if someone came with any kind of power, everyone will be deceived and thinking that was Jesus, unless people told them, no, Jesus said these things were going to happen before he arrives. Jesus is going to come the same way he left, on the clouds, from the sky. The Antichrist doesn't come like that. He shows up out of nowhere as a politician and tries to change the world and claims to be peaceful and to change everything. Jesus is going to come, and in one single day, he's going to eliminate all of everything that is evil. He's going to make peace one single day. This guy shows up claiming peace and a 7-year peace treaty, or that he can do anything, and you see him doing things, and it takes more than a day, more than 24 hours, Antichrist. Guaranteed. So that's all we're going to talk about today. And like I said, tomorrow we're going to get into the next day. I forgot what it was right now. But I know it's significant. I'll just look back at the video and figure it out. But thanks for watching. If you enjoy this information, like, subscribe, more than anything, talk about it. Because that's how we learn and that's how we prepare. That's how we watch and how we're ready for the Antichrist to come, for Jesus to come. It's how we spread the word. This is how we arm ourselves with the sword of the word. So thanks again for listening, and have a good one.